a good time to start after we already exhausted everything.
I don't know why. It just feels like a more convenient way to continue to shitpost.
I'll just sit here and paint this model.
Yeah. But you do see that having a talk is different.
So, drugs.
Because then it becomes an effort in trying to communicate the information rather than discovering it. So it's that sequential. You have to do the big think, and then you have to do the big talk, but you can't do them both at the same time. The curse of our natural design.
Pretty much until you randomly get taken by the muse, similar to when you get an idea for a painting or something, and then you just start rambling insanity at people almost naturally. And then it probably comes out like when a black person is screaming at a TV reporter.
I think a big part of getting in that state is some form of sensory deprivation. Like being very, very upset. That could be one. But you can't have that kind of sensory deprivation when you're in a civil conversation.
So if you had a talk show where everyone was blindfolded, wearing ear deafening headphones.
And well, even then, yes, that would be an improvement. That would be a first step towards sensory deprivation because you'd be depriving. Well, they wouldn't hear each other, so you'd have to get rid of the earphones.
No. No, you have to do it that way.
Yeah, that'd be. I would watch that. I would definitely watch that.
They're like in straight jackets on like a talk show set.
It's a talk show, but talk in the literal sense. There's no conversation going on.
It's almost like an HR Giger painting, but in talk show form.
No, it's a brilliant idea because when you know those headphones that deprive you of so much any kind of auditory stimuli that you hear your own heartbeat and you hear your own breathing.
Where you hear constant ringing from your tinnitus.
Insane. Exactly. All you hear is that would drive people completely insane.
It would take them into a primal state, and you just have people totally lost in their own minds, screaming things simultaneously on a couch.
And then the ones that still hang on, the ones that don't want to play the game. Oh, I understand this is all a game, and you just get electrical prods. You torture them.
Imagine.
And the show ends when all the people on the talk show are screaming simultaneously. That's when it stops.
Imagining like a public access TV show, you're just flipping through channels and there's just a random show with people in straight jackets with blindfolds and ear deafeners.
And the talk show host is counting and says, "Oh, but only 6 of the 7 of them are screaming. We have to wait for the 7th to get there."
I need to steal this idea.
Yes, it's a fantastic idea. I feel like the Soviets must have tried that in some kind of experiment. Or better yet, CIA.
I feel like I can try to get people to participate in this.
Yeah. Better yet, you get
It's at first they'll act like it's all a joke, and they'll just try to joke around. They'll
exactly.
try to be funny and stuff, but you gotta wait until around the fifth hour, and
You
then
get like pseudo intellectuals, you know? You get Noam Chomsky and you get famous CEOs, you get Tim Cook on there, and you put them on straitjackets, and these people are very self-confident, you know? And you give them a topic. So Noam Chomsky is going to sit in the straitjacket with the sensory deprivation on, and he's going to tell us about anarchism. And inevitably, an hour later, he was going to be screaming like the rest of them. A wonderful exercise in humility. A good improvement would be um, having a screen behind each of them that just has someone typing exactly what they're saying. So then it becomes more like watching, the heart monitors of dying patients, watching it trickle slowly down to just and that's when you know they're over. They're done.
and it probably would happen too, because around even possibly just an hour, you're already. It seems like the natural reaction to just start to stimulate yourself any way you can. It's like you can't hear what you're saying, and I can't explain it, but it feels right to scream, and it helps that there's other people
It
there.
very much does. It very much does. You want to escape the nothingness at some point. And the only way to do that is to affirm your own existence. The only way you really can. Just to turn into a screaming madman. It would be great too, because it would have a competitive dimension to it. Later iterations of the show, you would have people competing to be the last one to go mad.
Theoretically, what if there's a loser somehow in this setup, and he gets a bucket of green slime dumped on him?
Yeah? First one to lose.
I don't know how you lose that, but
First one to scream. The more you make them struggle against the screaming, the better the payoff, really. Because then you get structured madness.
And there's no point to it if they just know they can scream at any time. And you have to drive them mad and make them try not to fall.
Yeah. You need the final hubris to be.
well, then they could just sit there in silence. I mean, if there's like nothing stopping them from screaming, then you have some people trying to be funny, and then other people are just screaming, and they don't even know that the other person is screaming. They're just one person's just casually talking, being completely drowned out by two people screaming.
Well, maybe put them like in glass cases. When they start screaming, you just close the glass case.
You just, you put an airtight container around them.
Yeah, no, exactly. Have them in sound isolated rooms. Each of them, they're separate rooms. and then just switch between them.
It has. They have to be in like glass boxes, like at a magician show, but they have to be next to each other so you can look at all of them at the same time.
Yeah, I feel like that TV show would have a lot of interesting things to listen to, right? That the participants would say. So you can't have you'd have it to just be segments, right? And of course, when participants start rambling about things that are deeply embarrassing to them, or things just simply not appropriate for TV audiences, or things they would sue you over, you'd have to cut that out. So having the TV show live,
Yeah, you never know what somebody's going to say under pseudo duress.
What if? What?
well, you do.
Well, yeah, but they
And that's
might not.
exactly what viewers are there for.
Would you have to do anything about it? Because does it apply if they start screaming nigger kike and that they're gonna blow up the building?
Well, you'd have to check with them after and say, so when we air the show, would you like to include the ramblings about your mother? No, just cut that up. But you would have impressive moments of insight from some of the participants. And then you'd want that to be viewed in full. So maybe the whole exercise is an hour long, but you get 2 hours over 5 different participants of interesting content. And then the rest of, so 5, an hour, the other 3 hours is just incoherent babbling and screaming. Just have a funny montage of that.
What if this show went on a cross country tour and you have they like set up a stage on like streets with these people street jacketed the chairs in the exact same setup.
So just show up with a van. Just stick them all in the van, put a camera in there. Are you talking about like kidnapping people off the street and doing that snuff film style?
Well, I was just saying they could just be normal participants, but for some reason this show just like when people uh, advertise their products at like a mall or something, they you set up a stage and you just all the people have to see these straight jacketed, blindfolded, earphoned people screaming. In the exact
Um,
same setup.
I mean,
And the
I mean,
people, they
I personally see the value in public torture, but I think that you just would encounter problems trying to execute on that.
how long would it take to break a ironic? Is it ironic? Is it ironic memes like an ironic memeing YouTuber celeb in this setup? How long would it take for him to have his facade broken?
Really, I think the time you would last on the show would be indicative of your own strength of will. Your average ironic YouTuber doesn't have much of that. Of course, it would be absolutely spectacular to have someone ironically scream for the first hour, only to last another 12 of just wonderful structured discussion.
They act ironic, scream ironically for the first hour, but then they still have another 13 hours to go.
Devolve into insanity, but only ironically. Well, that would be something to watch.
Yeah,
But yeah,
like
there's
the
potential
first
there.
hour. Yes, nothing's real yet. Everybody's still talking about anarchism or just ironically screaming or whatever.
They're still
It's not interesting.
they're still in a superficial, constructed false reality for the first segment.
You throw them into the void for the first hour, and it's yet to consume their whole personality. But I think a couple hours in, yeah. Of course, it would be difficult to put people in a straitjacket, blindfold, and all that. People have needs, and after a while, they would want to leave that state.
Well, 12 hours is nothing. I mean, they'll want to leave it and they'll be uncomfortable, but they'll be fine.
Yeah, you have to make them feel like they're a pussy for failing.
You don't want them to shit themselves.
Well,
That's
just
why you
give
make
them
them shit,
something.
force them to shit before they do it.
You know,
want to walk that
expand.
fine line between Stanford Prison Experiment and show, And it's a very fine line indeed here.
What if that's the next evolution in shows is recreating top secret experiments on a show?
Oh, we got 5 people together and gave them lethal doses of typhus. and we're making them write their diary.
I would.
Famous experiments indeed.
I'd pay a subscription to watch that.
Okay, now I'd pay a feature film ticket price to watch that.
And that is why once everyone gets tired of irony and post irony, we'll be back to literally torturing people for entertainment. Because we seek a return to the traditional after we've frolicked in the meadows of post irony and postmodernism for so long. You want something real. You will want draconian methods brought back because it's real.
On today's edition of Nightmare Talk, we pull people's teeth out. Pull people's toenails off. We inject them with child-size EpiPens. Oh, that would be fantastic. You put them in the whole sensory deprivation mode, and then you inject them on things.
Inject. You know what's an insane experience is someone slipping LSD into like a drink, and you not knowing that you are slowly descending into a state of mind you would have normally needed to prepare for. So people unfamiliar with the experience, that's another way. That's another show idea.
You
Because
mix drugs together.
yeah, normally people unfamiliar with it and they unknowingly ingest it, they automatically believe that they're dying, which is something to observe in itself.
Yeah. Yes. And you can get around the aspect of them knowing what it is by mixing drugs. But of course, that experience is mostly personal. You don't get much content that you would want to watch or listen to, apart just watching someone clearly having a mental episode for a couple hours.
I'd potentially watch that. I'd watch someone who's never done a drug get drugged.
Yeah, I
Watch
mean,
them
sure.
rock back and forth, like the bug eye expression. They open their eyelids as far as they can go and just are staring into space.
But how much replayability does that really have? I mean, it's
Exactly.
not going to be unique content for every person who you do that to.
Well, theoretically, if it's a show about bringing back tradition via the use of torture, then you have other methods, but simulating death by drugging people is only one.
Sensory deprivation. Like the drug experiences is like it could be an episode, but I doubt it would yield anything else than just the novelty of watching that happen for the first time.
Well, that's why you just do it to enough people and wait until one does something crazy. Like slit their throat with a shard of glass.
They are in straitjackets, though.
Well, the people being drugged are in straitjackets.
Yeah.
Wait, are we drugging the sensory deprivation people?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we were talking
Or
about
better
that.
yet, you get them in the sensory deprivation mode, you drug them, you wait until they're high, and then you release them. But what will immediately ensue is that they're just going to leak liquids from every orifice they have and attack things.
Sensory deprivation for about 7
That's-
hours, and then LSD.
I mean, drugs. It doesn't have that much of a novelty factor, I think. The torture does, but the torture you already have to ask yourself if you can get away with it.
Well, how much is it really torture? I mean, they have like psychological studies at universities that do the same thing.
Just
Yeah,
make
but that's for
them.
science, not for entertainment.
Oh, it'll be fine.
Just say that they're a pussy, and then they'll do it.
Just
Do it, you
like
pussy.
print a life-size cardboard cutout of their dad and just have a speaker behind it.
Man the fuck up. I ran through trenches in Vietnam that were crazier. This, what, sitting in a chair?
You put that behind a glass wall while they attack the glass wall. See, this is proof that the patriarchy is supposed to be collapsed. Just imagine the sheer volume of BuzzFeed articles that TV show would provoke. Sounds like something that people can't hide.
Economy. We have
true.
Yes, the economy.
The economy is not looking good.
But we think it could rebound.
After,
The
Congress passed a
economy.
bill.
The economy. The economy.
Well, everyone was in voice.
What did Disney call their idea engineering thing? Idea engineering? Idea. Imagine. There it is. Imagine. Glad I can hear how much of a downy retard I sound like now.
They call it imagining.
Imagineering.
I think isn't everyone supposed to hate the sound of their voice for some obscure reason I don't recall?
I know sometimes I think, yeah, I wish my voice sounded like it does here all the time. But whenever I sit in this chair, I talk like this.
I think the idea is that you personally hear yourself with a lot more bass because your skull vibrates when you talk. And so you are stooped in the idea that your voice is supposed to provoke that agreeable skull vibrating. And then when you hear yourself and that's not the case, your brain panics because it's not getting its vibration hit.
I mean,
Is the solution to just get like a back massager thing and tape it to your head, and then every time you hear yourself talk, just hit the on button?
Just get a speaker surgically implanted into your brain. Just snort coke, your own voice on a recording. Imagineering. Is that really what they call it?
I have, for some reason, a music album which is just a compilation of a documentary on the construction of Disney World, and that is what they call it. The City of Tomorrow.
The gratuitous structure. Inevitably to be met with an equal treatment and hubris.
I'm sure that when people get displaced and poor lives basically mean nothing, we can see a return to the tradition.
The tradition of humanely going out and torturing people until they die.
Well, that's just what life's about, really.
I mean, you look at it and it's all just a cycle.
Everything is just a form, watered down experience of doing. You're just waiting for the moment where you can actually do it.
People aren't truly happy unless they're torturing a different person. Being unfulfilled in life is one of the worst experiences.
I think the real joy of it would be that you're inflicting the torture on yourself that you can't escape. You've put yourself in the straitjacket, in the sensory deprivation material. There's no escape anymore. You have to go through with the torture you've chosen to put yourself through. Having contestants say to the camera, yes, I choose to do this. I want to do this.
And that's all you need to straitjacket them for 14 hours.
And they'll realize that the person that said that to the camera, they have now come to hate beyond all things that they know of.
Exactly.
And the destruction of self is complete.
And the advertising dollars are made.
The whole journey of life itself condensed in a couple of hours.
It's exactly the same as like every time that, like both the times I dropped acid, I said that guy is not me, and I fucking hate him. And this is a way to replicate that just purely with biology.
You get them out of the straitjacket, you hand them a gun, observe results.
Now, would that be assisted suicide or facilitated suicide? Or even murder?
Well, it's certainly not murder if you're not pulling the trigger.
Or would the court interpret it that way?
Well, that the judge would charge you for pulling their cosmic trigger brigade. But really anything that disturbs, even in a mild way, the consensus that exists in the minds of the people who created justice in the first place would have you indicted. So it doesn't matter whether they even kill themselves or not. It's just the fact that the experimentation is happening just be reason enough to kill you. Really, justice is based on punishing people that put others through experiences that if you yourself were to go through it, would not like. As long as that empathy for a perceived pain is there, yeah, sure, they would, they'd call it murder. But is it really murder? No.
That would be an interesting court case where you defend yourself by deconstructing uh, deconstructing justice and the concept of murder.
That's where the idea of things as social constructs actually becomes interesting.
It's like some guy looks like a Nazi scientist in like a white lab coat, just defending himself that way.
They tortured those people, but really, the scientific knowledge we gained from it, well, it leads you to a place where you'd rather withhold judgment on the moral implications of that particular experimentation. That's where you want to get them on the I will withhold my moral judgment type of place. But I'm almost certain that the vast majority of viewership aren't even real people in the sense that they don't even have the sensibilities to contemplate the implications of what they're watching.
They just see people confined to chairs and screaming.
Yeah, and just act on whatever preconceived reaction they're meant to have to something like that. But it would be, yeah, it's one of those things that have to be, it has to be like an ISIS video, undisclosed location, undisclosed perpetrators. It's just a very well filmed torture video that makes you reflect on human nature. Except ISIS just blows people's heads off. Well, we would yeah, the show would also be about blowing people's heads off.
The metaphorical head.
Yes,
A metaphorical representation of a head.
so yes, it would be like making an ISIS video. I mean, yeah, there's no wealth and fame to be. Well, there is fame. Show content like that. But if I had the means, I would definitely sponsor it.
So, the way that black people lure white people into abandoned houses with the promise of a party, proceed to beat them up and hold them hostage while they take their credit cards and clean out their bank accounts, I think you could use that method to obtain participants.
Yeah.
And take their credit cards too.
Parties.
To fund it.
See, we want interesting individuals, not just your because you see your average normie just doesn't have that much going on in there. It really would be lacking. You'd have to go to someplace special, find special people, kidnap them, put them in the basement, do the sensory deprivation film, and it's a wrap. Oh, and of course, you knock them out with some drug and they wake up in a hotel room 300 miles away. The execution would be easy. You just have to be able to do that first step of kidnapping interesting people. Interesting people of similar sensibilities.
It depends how many people you have on staff. If you have at least 3 people, you can lure people, the right kind of person you want, to a remote area to jump them and keep them hostage.
Well, the thing about kidnapping, you don't get caught in the act. Usually, you get caught by kidnapping someone. They go missing for a month, and then they reconstruct where that person was taken, where the vehicles went off of, and so on and so forth. And then they eventually find the perpetrator. Here, you would kidnap them within a day, within the day. Um, the show would be filmed and so on and so forth, and the person returned to their lives. Right? Which
Oh, we're returning.
which means that there's a good chance you wouldn't be caught for that kidnapping aspect. And you could also outsource the kidnapping. Also a great idea. I'm almost certain there are plenty of people out there who would kidnap someone for $10,000, or at least try.
10,000. You might as well just do it yourself.
Exactly what I mean. You would do that. I don't think for $10,000 I'd risk the 10-something years in prison you would do for a kid trying to kidnap someone. Now, if you want like 5 people or show, that would be very expensive, $50,000 an episode. But when it comes to finding the locale, the number of people you need on staff, the kind of equipment, so on and so forth, it would really only amount to half the budget. And it also opens up the opportunity for some very interesting people to be on there. You could even ascend to anonymous levels of fame if you got well-respected, famous people kidnapped, put on the Nightmare Talk Show. Just imagine that. Oh, we put Hillary Clinton through this. Everyone would watch it. It would become a cultural phenomenon. But then you would have, the world's secret agencies breathing down your neck.
You wouldn't need to go that far. You just have to kidnap. And normies don't have much going on in their heads, but there is the social impact of tormenting people who wouldn't normally be subjected to such crimes, like more well-off people. So there's that benefit of just kidnapping young girls is not difficult. I'd have to say. They don't necessarily have to be famous.
Yeah, but then it would just be, rambling, crying, predictable things. You want the viewer to be brought to a point where they have to confront their own beliefs. The contents of a teenage girl's mind, I'm almost certain they are personally well acquainted.
Yeah, I guess it's not intellectually stimulating to try
You
to
get a
pick
Mormon
apart.
on there.
What does a Mormon have to say?
I don't know. You get people who have something interesting about.
Unironically, if you get a Jew, one of the Jewiest Jews you can get, put them through sensory deprivation for 10 hours.
See, now we're talking.
See if it's possible to shed away the natural instinct to never stop lying.
I don't even think that would be possible. I think they would manage to lie themselves into forgetting who they are. It would be deals, you know, they would go through the 5 stages of grief, but stop at bargaining.
They would literally never stop talking. It's like whenever people know that they're lying, it's exactly the same thing. They will just keep lying, no matter what happens. Absolutely nothing stops them. So they will just talk and just keep doing the same thing for eternity, even with sensory deprivation, even having no idea what the outside world around them is, or if anyone is even in the room with them.
You know what? This is what this is an exorcism. You'd be performing an exorcism. So here's the idea. Here's the idea. You kidnap them. You put them in some kind of cell somewhere, and you tell them, you know, try to get them to believe something about how this is for their own safety. The government did this to you. Don't panic. You keep them in the cell. You don't feed them for 24 hours, so that you make sure that they're biologically ready to be put into a straitjacket until insanity occurs. And when they're nice and cleaned out and relaxed after these 24 hours, then you put them through this. And if it's interesting enough, you just repeat the experience. You make them go through it again.
You should pretend to be a government agency interrogating them.
Yeah, it's not an interrogation, it's an experiment. Yeah, but then once it would become a cultural phenomenon, people would understand what's going on.
They'd still eat it up because they've already exhausted everything that's spooky in every urban legend. There's about 50,000 YouTubers covering each topic. It's all been done to death. They'll just be relieved that something new has happened. Someone has actually done something genuine.
Yeah, that's why I'm talking about, getting famous politicians, CEOs, the kind. Put Simon Hyde in there just for the ironic value. You don't discriminate. You put everyone through the chair.
If we
You
just
put
had
family members through just to fool the government.
these are the
Yeah.
ideas that if you were like a research director in an intelligence agency, you would just do it. This sounds like a good idea.
I mean, I'm almost certain that they've already done it, but
I know for a
being
fact
that
that without a doubt they have.
they're unenlightened people, though, they wouldn't know what to look for. We know exactly what to look for. And I picture secret agency experiments to be, well, what are we trying to do? Well, mind control. What are we trying to do? Get someone to be traumatized until they kill themselves. They do it. They find that whatever experiment works, but there's no lesson there. There's no sharing an insight on human nature.
It's like MK
It's all
Ultra.
functional.
They want to make like they want to test this drug, but they've never done the drug to themselves. They don't want to. It's a purely point A to B kind of cold, done for another objective other than like almost spiritual. Just wanting to explore the depths of how brains work, psychology. But if to only have that power though, be the right person in the right place, and it all just works out.
Of course, all of this would be a great idea if we actually cared about exposing people to these kinds of insights. It would be a lot of work to create the right kind of entertainment do they deserve.
Would they understand it?
I think they would. I think they would. Or at least those deserving would. Those undeserving aren't even real people.
Sadly, all we can hope for is one of us figures out how to pump out some manipulative media. Kidnapping people is just a lot of work. Like theoretically, like let's say, like if you had this game where a representation of a, a person who is also doubles as a representation of murderous intent gradually taking you through a series of lessons in order to simulate indoctrination into death cults. And then this would be geared at 12-year-olds, most likely neglected by their families and driven to escapism on the internet.
Uh-huh. I feel like this already exists.
I feel like Harvester only did it as a joke. But I feel like the guy tried to convey that, but he wasn't. It wasn't genuine. He wasn't really ever in that state of mind that he was symbolizing.
You know, scale is satisfying, but structure for structure's sake is sure to be met with equal hubris. You can't. You have to meditate on what the purpose of all of this is, and you'll quickly realize that it's just not one worth pursuing.
What? Meditate on what specifically?
Well, just generally getting people to
Well, for my ideas,
hate existence.
well, see, every time I go to work, it's kind of it's almost an act of meditation for 5 hours while being completely submerged in complete hatred for existence. As
You do that at work.
well, it's kind of like, it's a job where if you're someone who thinks too much, you're just like a prisoner in your own head, stuck in an environment that provides no stimuli. So you kind of just have nothing to do but to escape into your mind.
Yeah, I know.
And then
I rather enjoy that.
and then and then I'm also listening to like psychedelic trippy music to, put a colorful spin on what I'm envisioning.
Well, that's what you're doing wrong.
Well, the colors are to seduce the consumer into consuming the message. That's where the feng shui comes in.
Do tell.
Well, it's like whenever I did LSD, I became obsessed with just actual feng shui, not bullshit feng shui, where there's a theory, there's a way to objectively put multiple things in the correct positions for the optimal pleasure of the perceiver. And so you just use that to teach them to acknowledge what existence is and to not rule out the possibility, or not to rule out some options at their disposal should existence not work out for them. And such options are nothing illegal, just getting a hobby, build a birdhouse, and it'll teach them that after it seduces them.
Does it ever occur to you that that kind of feng shui exists in people's lives already? That the fate they get is the fate they deserve?
Oh yeah, it exists. People do come to the like color theory, marketing, all that. But just going into a complete state of schizophrenia with the help of drugs to go somewhere deeper, to know what people really want and present it to them. It seems to manifest itself into a psychedelic retro pseudo Tumblr presentation to teach them about spooks, about what do I have here? Lessons. Let's see. Be a brick wall to stop beggars. No one cares what you think. Why do you care what others think? Something about analogies. Everything you do is quickly forgotten. Self-sacrificing yourself for others you have to live with your own wounds, whereas they discard you, whatever. And you can counter this by building a birdhouse.
So you want to do the inverse of a birdhouse.
Yeah, build an inverse birdhouse.
Force people to confront the futility of life.
Not, it's, that's just a couple things, but it's, I want to simulate the indoctrination that I experienced and then make children go through that.
You see that indoctrination starts from a very special place. And it starts from the notion that you were doomed, that you were cursed, that you are effectively the victim of a circumstance.
That can come from a lot of places, especially thanks to modernity and the sheer number of children who now live on electronics, consuming escapism, and they seem to have no one in their lives that have any interest in what they do. So they latch on to media, and this is just all that they need to. Because here's the thing about how I was indoctrinated is that I was just a happy-go-lucky class clown, and I was just told a phrase, and I merely looked it up, and I just embraced the world that I had my eyes open to on the internet. And in retrospect, I considered myself a victim.
I don't think so.
No, I was actually very
the
dumb.
idea of a victim. The idea of a victim. What I'm saying is that the process that you're describing, the inverse birdhouse, is exactly the mindset that they'll end up in. That of a victim. What makes your experience special? The experience of, and I'm trying to put this into a coherent, elegant phrase of words. I think it's all along that bloomed given that indoctrination process. And I don't share in your faith that all these teenage kids abandon, not look after, a step away from going on the internet and blooming themselves. I don't think they have that seed. Because that comes from a much more special place. I think it comes from experiencing.
Are you saying that you need something to be able to interpret yourself as a victim? You need like an actual experience to be able to.
No. To step away from the victim idea. No, to be pushed to a point where you want to overcome the reality you were given, which is really what the internet, what you're describing is being brought to a place where you want to do something more, be a part of something greater than the reality you know. comes from some kind of motivation to overcome or to tear down the reality you know to find a greater one. I see no beauty in the world I live in now, and so I am motivated. As you said, look up a phrase, find something in the internet, explore that, internalize that, become something more, move on after that. There's no drive in most of the kids who are eat, sleep, Fortnite, repeat.
What you're describing is just what I was whenever I got indoctrinated into the Columbine cult. That's all I did was I would just play video games all the time. I was really dumb. I never thought about anything. And being forced into homeschooling and just having the internet and just being pointed towards this method of thinking in sprinkles. And for anyone, any NSA recording this voice chat is a long gone relic. But I was the dumb kid that all these dumb kids are. And you can see it in recently, like, Medeker's video on Bulbapedia, which turned out to be a pedophile ring.
What isn't these days? Looking at you, NSA.
These kids, they just have nothing, and they're just dumb. And they just consume things, and it doesn't take much for them to believe anything. If you just submerge them into layers of one belief, they just accept it because it's all they know. And so on Bulbapedia, you have a bunch of sexually gender confused children, thanks to the community.
Perfectly agree. But do these people understand what they've gone through the way you do?
I understand it in retrospect. After I was immediately indoctrinated into it, all I wanted to do was just to kill people and then myself, and I didn't think about it too hard.
You got to a place that transcended belief. It's not just about believing anymore. So the kid starts, and you're saying, so they have a lot in common. And I can see it in myself as well. They all have these traits in common that lead them to be soft-skulled cultists for whatever cult they first encounter online. Adopt those beliefs, bloom into whatever monstrosity it makes them into. But then what? My point is that, sure, a lot of them will be led out of randomness or because those places have some kind of appeal. But there's something different about people who move beyond that.
It was the layering beyond just wanting to kill people did start from getting another mindset thanks to Alex Jones and belief in conspiracies. Accumulating as many perspectives as you can is what makes a more complex brain. But
I disagree. I think one's ability to become more than the sum of these perspectives
that's
is what makes the difference between just somebody who's going to be believing in these perspectives, residing in the belief of these perspectives, and someone who can take all these beliefs and perspectives and create something new, create their own paradigm,
Like
out
you
of these
can
paradigms that they've internalized.
you do that eventually, but it takes a while of assimilating perspectives to do that because
I take that for granted
I mean,
that at some point people do that. Most people don't, no matter how many perspectives you throw at them. They pick a paradigm they like best because it's a self-serving exercise for a lot of people, and then will refuse new paradigms.
well, that's repeatedly what we go through. I mean, but eventually you do transcend everything. It just takes like it took me 11 to 12 years of just assimilating and regurgitating perspectives to get to something where you start to invent things yourself. And because all we are is we're just chatbots. Like eventually it has assimilated enough algorithms to make more complex things, but all it is just a cross referencing from its memory of the things that it remembered. All you do is just you're being fed the perspectives that are just tools to make a unique thought. So
I'm certain it's not a quantitative breaking point. I'm certain it's just that it fuels a part of yourself. It feeds something different that then takes on the ability to generate a paradigm, your own, very own reality that exists only in your head, that is much more than the sum of everything, all that information you've taken in. You're not like the chatbot neighbors. You can find on just about any image board or any Discord or anywhere on the internet. There's a difference there. I'm almost certain of it. Almost, I am.
I mean, if you've taken like DMT, you should know that you should have been able to look at people and see that they're just meat robots driven by computers made of fat. So it's like it is complicated, but it's also not really mechanically because you can't make an original thought if you have nothing aside from you need to assimilate to make more complicated to make a more complicated perspective.
You're focusing on what's in common because you deconstruct it. So you say, I agree with you. You need to assimilate. You need the parts to make a whole. The idea being that maybe the whole is bigger than the parts, but not in the quantitative sense. People may be meat bags driven by computers. Some people are more than that.
Well, I think we want to think that, but I mean, every time it's helpful that I actually did. It's really dumb that it's drugs that reminds me of this because it sounds like I'm about to turn into a stoner, but
Well,
it
because
does.
you're basing it off sensory experience, and sensory experience is just that.
It still it deconstructs you. It like depersonalizes you so that you can observe yourself, so that you can
But the
remember
more
that
you
you
focus
are.
on that deconstruction, the more you're just going to focus on the parts that make the whole, not the greater whole as opposed to the whole of just the parts.
But it's still
Don't find the equation, find the emergent phenomena. Example. You talked about people and their biology. You put the biology together, you put the brain together, and so on and so forth. The sum is greater than the whole. You're going to have someone with an identity. You're going to have a unique phenomenon, a person. And when you say all persons are meat bags with computers, deconstructing people, you're never wrong. You're never wrong. You always find what the parts that make a person are. But what that omits is that those parts have made a whole that should be greater than the parts, which is the person. And so what you've managed to do is only observe persons as being computers and meat bags instead of observing the person minus the parts. That part that shouldn't exist. The paradigm that you have, the sum of ideas and information and so on and so forth that you've taken in, forget those, look at what's left.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that too, but it's still like
There's no certainty in it though.
just because it's like an amazing and complicated thing that what a personality could be. It's still like both times on LSD, of course, I experienced like the inability to immediately access the memories that I could normally. So I would have my ego and my personality like completely altered, and then that taught me that it's totally temporary. It's all it is just a cross-referencing of data. It's not to downplay the significance of it, but it's still like if you work from the ground up, you know, you can see how the machine runs. You can piece together what makes a personality, for instance, and a personality just flips on the fly. Which is
And then what? You've understood all the parts that make the personality.
So there is
But
nothing.
does that matter?
No, it doesn't. It's just interesting to know.
It's interesting to know, but what matters is the personality that's been created. And that's not a quantitative phenomenon. It's not about parts. It's not
Well,
about how it works.
Well, the thing is that could be quantitative because then, if you can piece together the parts that made it, because if I was given about 30 minutes, I could probably piece together exactly why I think everything I do, and it's just my brain piecing together from all of my memories to make me think a certain way. So you are just assimilating all the perspectives you ever have consumed. Not just perspectives, there's also just any stimuli. You're just taking in the world and reassimilating it. And you can quantify
You're forgetting something. Think about it this way. So you've created a perspective that is in terms of equations, of sums. I agree with that. If you really look into any phenomenon, you can find the parts that make it. Have you considered, however, the summation process itself and the fact that something new is created? It's the intangibles. It's the plus and the minus and the equal sign, which we take for granted. If I take my thoughts and I piece them back from the information that resides in my brain, so on and so forth, I can find that. I can. But before that, before there was a thought, there was only information and memories and so on and so forth. What made the difference between that information, those memories, and the parts that will later make a thought and a thought, what triggers that?
Are you talking about like a center of your being that judges what to assimilate?
No. I'm talking about how. You have all this information coursing through your head. All the parts come together. Why do the parts make something new?
Because you're taking what works and what doesn't. You're learning from the shortcomings of all of them, but taking what they have that's beneficial.
So do you consciously consider every part of a thought and then consciously make it into a thought?
You still
No.
But your ability to do that, your ability to like want an answer, only comes from your assimilation, like because there's so many
Let's take a
mindsets.
simpler exercise. And the idea is that this is universal to everything that is parts and whole. I take the pieces of an engine. Simpler still. I take the pieces of a car, put it together. It works. In the qualitative side of things, you went from parts to car. It's a transformation process. And so there has to be a transformation trigger. Something has to make the transformation from pieces to car. Now, you could say, oh, that's the assembly line and so on and so forth. I don't think so. I think the idea is that when something becomes a whole from parts, there's an intangible to that process. An unseen glue of sorts. Same way your body makes tissue out of proteins. How does it know to do that? We know the mechanisms that create it. We can point to mechanisms that make it, but what makes the difference between parts and car? It's not a car until I put in the last part, is it? It's one of those the reflections on Platonic form, right? Plato says, oh, what is the perfect form of something, and so on and so forth, that kind of stuff. How do you qualitatively define something? Well, the idea here is that when things become greater than the sum of their parts, it's a qualitative exercise in creation, not a quantitative one, a qualitative. And so you're saying you reflect with LSD and so on and so forth on thoughts and how they come together and so on and so forth. My concept is that there's the quantitative creation process, the thought composed of everything that comes into making it. and then that can be perfectly equated and traced back, but there's a shadow to that, which is the qualitative creation process, which is what counts. The idea that information memories in the brain so can create a thought.
Are you saying that are you talking about a drive to want to make a more qualitative thought?
No, like I said, it's a universal to everything, to everything that can be understood as parts making a whole. Because else everything would just be primordial energy, pieces of nothing that wouldn't cohesively get together, create wholes, create things that make larger things, that create larger things by coming together and together and together. It's an emergent phenomenon. From the parts emerge a whole. We were talking about music earlier. The patterns in the music. So you have the instruments, they come together, they make these patterns and so on and so forth. But when you listen to it, something new happens. So you can say it's an experience, and music makes experiences. And I can explain this in quantitative terms of the music, its patterns, and the information, and my experiences, and so on and so forth. But you're ignoring the important part, and really the only part that exists. And that's the qualitative part, which is that you've just created something by listening to music. Or my ramblings. Or my ramblings even the mildest understandable?
I'm not sure what you're saying that I'm leaving out. Because this comes from me wanting to recreate the like what you're talking about is really abstract and out there. I am missing the point. But I'm talking about trying to recreate the thoughts that were fed to me. I don't know what my end game is. If it produces, let's hypothetically, if it produces more, well, I shouldn't say, but more birdhouse builders.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a means, because the people this would be aimed at are so simple, and you are introducing. They are at the beginning of where I was, because up until then it was just a slide of blissful ignorance and stupidity, and then the indoctrination into mass murderers began the chain of thought that allowed me to actually start to develop something.
What you're describing is an emergent phenomenon. Parts coming together, creating a whole. And you want to recreate that by having the same parts come together for many people so that they can experience the same whole as you do.
At least move them onto onto the path of getting there.
Yeah. And it's the feng shui, it's the bird.
Yeah.
Well, the elegance of feng shui is that it's not reproducible because the emergent whole is unique. With the same parts, you create different wholes for different peoples. because they themselves are a part of that process.
But if it seems to be a base value of ignorance, though, and for me it was the beginning where I was indoctrinated, and then it was just a repeated series of indoctrinations. So if you can now you might not even have to settle for just one. If you can indoctrinate them into multiple things, it causes them to start to piece something together, something constructive.
Does it?
Because it doesn't take much to make them construct themselves into
Because
gender
they're
confused.
already so similar to you. Oh, well, as you were before.
Yeah, because it seems to be a baseline of ignorance. If you're just in that impressionable, innocent, stupid phase, all it takes is the introduction of like anyone's worldviews. Like for some people, it's Tumblr, gender, whatever that makes them sexually confused kids being manipulated by pedophiles. Or in my case, it was I just got absolutely obsessed with Eric and Dylan from Columbine. And then that introduced me into other things like solipsism and whatever. I started to make more complicated, abstract thoughts from that.
There's a driver to this, isn't there? You brought something. You are a part which made all of these different parts come together as the whole that you are today.
Do you have. Are you saying that I had any control over it?
No.
Because that is also.
I'm saying that since you were a part of that process, you got a result unique to yourself. And that these kids, sure, they have the same circumstances and they have access to the same information and experiences that led you to be, but that they will still bring themselves to that equation. And that would make a larger difference than all of these parts you are describing. At least in what the result that they obtain are. You've made out of these parts something that maybe they can't. Because they're different.
But I don't think it's that different. The baseline ignorance, and they're also all the same. Kids with no friends, neglected, delving deep into electronics. Like my only stimuli was what I was reading, and I was just my entire identity was based off of what I read. So it was 100% what I read. And as time passed, your dependency on a single material decreases as you become dependent on more materials, and it just increases exponentially. And then in your 20s, you are a deeply more complex being. Like it literally like fractalizes out. You just need that chain reaction, and the false igniters that they get is shit like gender fluidity and shit. They get politics, they get absolute garbage. It's like you have what I was just a complete dependency on what I read. There's like nothing. there's actually not that much of a difference between me and them because everyone is just dependent on what they submerged themselves in of the
I don't
abstract.
agree. I really don't agree.
Because, well, the
Just
only
because just because what you read or what you interacted with at that age was the element that triggered a transformation. It was another piece in the puzzle that made the whole. Doesn't mean that you yourself had nothing to bring to the equation.
well, what is yourself? You're just, especially at that young age, you're just totally subjected to the environment. And what was my environment? It was just playing video games and going to school, living the same life
Deconstruct
that
it and
everyone
you'll
else.
find what's in common. Deconstruct and you'll find what's in common. Look at what the result is, which is that these kids are not becoming the same. They're becoming gender fluid pedatoids, that they're becoming politics obsessed cultists,
So you're
that they're
saying,
becoming something and everything.
all right, so what you're saying is that I am like focusing on the deconstruction, but I am missing something because the results will be different despite what I say.
No, that deconstruction is just a tool to find what's in common. You found that. But that does not look at the full process that you're trying to look at here.
Well, what am I forgetting about the human self? Am I forgetting their environment?
No. No, you're just. There's not something you've forgotten. You found everything that they have in common.
Well, what am I leaving out that's different?
What they don't have in common. What is unique to them.
What is then? What could be the difference between myself as a child and them now?
The way all of these experiences, the way all of these parts stack up, will be different to them than to you.
But all it needs to be is one of the first things that they actually experience that makes them think. That's all it has to be. If like it just has to simulate the primer. I understand that people
I'm not
get
disagreeing with that, by the way.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
you can, with a birdhouse, lead them along the same path.
it's
But what I'm saying is that you could improve your process and your perspective on all of this by looking beyond the parts.
you want me to reassess how the information comes in sequentially and how it is stacked because then it makes people on different mindsets like how on people on Fortune could be similar ages having lived similar lives but they're on totally different states of mind but they've probably processed the same information as each other just different at different sequences.
No, I think the idea is that you can have an overwhelming degree of similarity, but some of the parts are far more determinant than others. And there's a part of you that's so determinant that it can be held responsible, say, that it can be described as the cause of what led you to your particular
So leaving out
transformations.
I'm leaving out like if someone like molested them, I'm leaving that out and that would disrupt the process too much. Cuz that would be like a prime motivator for them that would cause them to be different.
You're trying to transform them. Okay, right. So you're creating a process that transforms, that leads them along the same path in your words. But it is a transformation process, and you are transforming something. And I think you're looking at the wrong things as to what you're transforming. What's transforming them, you have right. These elements that they have in common, these conditions, this information, this environment, this upbringing, that's what's transforming them. But what you're transforming, and you just assume that away as being the person, you're missing. Because the core of someone's identity, okay, what makes them an absolutely unique person, what they choose as the focus of their self, okay, what the self centers around, that precious single part around which their entire psyche is formed, I believe is something that will be unique enough that despite all the elements being in place to transform them into follow the same path as you have, that might not be the case, because you all it does is that it compensates for a difference in the part that is central to what makes themselves yourself. If as children, like you described it, they really are despondent, empty, despairing, and that this becomes the center point of their identity, of their self, then there's no doubt that giving the similar parts that will transform them, they will follow in your path. What I'm contesting here is that these kids have something of despair, something of violence, of an element of their self that can be transformed, expanded upon to become following your path. In a sense, we're not just the product of our experiences in our environment. We're the product of how we've constructed ourselves by our own will, what we've chosen to put as the center of our identity.
But see, that's where the disagreement is, because I think that in order to have the tools to construct yourself, that's just a byproduct of other things that have been fed to you.
I'm almost certain that a fed identity is an illusion.
Well, still, like, especially at a young age, we're desperate to have an identity and we act towards achieving that at all costs.
God. Look to yourself again. So you talk about how you used to be absolutely nothing. There is nothing, and then there was the elements that came together to make you. I disagree with that. On the basis of you had a self at the very start of all of this.
I had as much of a self as living things have a self. There's a center of your biology, but in terms of the abstract, the stuff that guides humans, it's like it's that comes
So you
just
had
from the
something
environment.
unique to you. You had something unique to you. I had something unique to me.
The only thing that's unique to you is your environment and maybe if you're born with like medical problems.
No, it's how it stacks up, how you stack it up. It's life's a butterfly effect that starts
But,
with the first
but you don't
interaction with your environment, but you are the mover in a lot of this.
you don't know how to stack it up unless the world teaches you how to, though.
I
There's
don't think so.
there
No,
might
I
be
think
there
you
might
innately
be
stack it up.
there might be
It's just
instincts
that the
like,
world teaches you to stack it up in a way that will make you into something that the world wants you to be.
well, that's how you feel that the world wants you to be. Because I don't think the world wanted me to kill people and then myself, which is the conclusion that I came to a long time ago. And not anymore, by the way.
Of course, no, no.
Because
My concept is that that is the result of transforming, expanding something that was a part of you from the start, or almost the start. And it doesn't come from a place of experience in the same sense as you took in information and consciously transformed it.
so this is like the crux of the disagreement is that there is an inherent biological self that assesses information by default to stack it up. And I mean, I don't beyond the environment, there's just your absolute biology. Other than that, you're really no different from anyone else. I still think it's the environment teaches you how to process the environment with a little help from instinct, but in a totally superficial and highly abstract world, the abstractions are what dominate you.
And the reason for that is that the environment may be the same, but everyone will have to experience it differently. They will.
Well, there will be the slight differences in people's biology and how they process information will produce
No.
the personalities.
It's all the same birdhouse, assuming, but everyone's going to assemble it differently.
But they can all
And so
they could
it's
all
not the
assemble
same
it the same.
birdhouse. They could, but every single step would have to be guided.
It doesn't have to be that guided though, because if it's the right catalyst, that they just have to get through the stage of can they kill people and then themselves, and if not, that they move to the next stage. That's pretty much that's pretty much the only eliminator in the equation, is if they can do it.
No. The feng shui is from how you assemble the bird. Not from the birdhouse, not if you can.
Well, the feng shui in this case is just the visuals and the way the world feels to optimally seduce a consumer to consume the ideas, which are not feng shui driven. It's
To
just
you, it is.
it's just the ideas they're just me ham fisting shit into it. Everything else is feng shui driven to seduce them. to consume the ideas.
So the idea is feng shui is universal patterns, right? That lead to repetition. The idea is that if you can create universal patterns, you can create repeatable action. It's all great. Feng Shui also is the recognition first of what isn't the universal pattern. By saying that you can see Feng Shui in the fact that there isn't Feng Shui because that's a universal pattern. But that's, never mind, that's just my own interpretation. You take these kids, you put them in a camp, you make them do the same things every day, all the time. They'll find a way to be different.
If they're okay, that is where the differences start to shine, because they will be different. They have to be absolutely the same. Like if
there are no absolutes.
If a kid was here and another was over there, they experience it differently, and that exponentially increases as animals clash. It's like
absolutely. That's exactly what I've been talking about so far, and that exponential is what means that the whole is going to be greater than its parts. All of these kids will finally achieve the same birth counts, and they will have used the same parts. But the experience that what they have become after this process will be different for all.
Well, I never had an intention to make them exactly like me. I just want to...
just enough that they think in a certain way like you.
It doesn't have to be the end game like I am right now. It just has to be that transition from absolute ignorance into being a complete psychopath, and then you just start processing the world's information at hyperspeed.
To have a self-defining paradigm.
It's just ignorance to extremely out-of-the-box, unconventional worldview that you can't even say that you have. And then that's your base.
Condense that. What is that really? It's to lead them to be able to create their own reality. Is that the essence of what you want them to achieve?
What I want to achieve with this really varies on my mood. But like if I was just at work, my end game would be, I got a kid to kill his entire family. Well, I'm at work, so I don't give a fuck.
I think what all of these thoughts have in common, what all these purposes that you're setting up, is the idea that you've brought kids to transcend reality and apply their will to a purpose.
See,
only resides around them.
They can derive their own meaning that fits their unique. The idea is that their lives are close enough. It does not have to be perfect, and it might not even work because maybe they were molested, so their only destiny is to be a cocksucker or something. Well, the shoe isn't going to fit everybody. That's fine. maybe they'll just visualize wanting to have gay sex with the bipedal crow walking around, but that's fine too. Still, it will serve the it'll reach enough people. Like there are kids who they're just neglected. They are just close enough to me. All that like it actually is an accurate broad brush for them to just be neglected and just escaping into electronics. That is actually close enough to seal the deal to consume the message the way it should be.
So their purpose can be just as unique as the way they're going to experience that message.
Because it is going to be different. There's nothing you can do about a lot of real world stuff, but if they are crazed loners, then this will either make them do something highly illegal, which was not the intention, or it'll actually take them on this path of self-discovery that takes a decade.
And this path of self-discovery is valuable. Why?
It would be, if we're talking, this is like kind of this is like a quantum benefit, because I'm pretty fucking bipolar, so I'm perfectly fine with either of the conclusions they come to along the way.
Which really are ultimately the same.
Well, the one involves being dead. The other involves being autistic. High-functioning autistic.
And what do they have in common? See, now that's where the deconstruction helps.
This is kind of the beauty of a modernized consumerist world, is that you still are being, humanity is being paved over to be similar in such a way, to have similar experiences. Like, we all played similar games, we all do similar things. Instead of one guy was out cutting wood and another guy was out fishing, they were both just on the computer. And maybe they were both even on the same website, being stimulated the same way.
It's an opportunity.
That's one of the things about modernization, is the homogenization of psyches.
And you want to turn that homogenization against itself. That's where the satisfaction is.
It would be satisfying to bait and switch utilizing, let's say, Tumblr visuals, Tumblr-esque hipster visuals, to feed a generation an extremely unconventional view.
It's turning the homogenization to its opposite. Kids going out to illegal.
Your voice is going robotic. Connection probably.
You've taken the homogeneity of all these kids doing the same, and given them something that will allow them to do the exact opposite. Right?
It will.
To each become empowered to do exactly what they want, regardless of what that is. It's the inversion of the homogeneity into a great chaos of autists and school shooters and people who are perfectly content despite all this.
Yeah, they would have been blissfully ignorant, and they would be your average sociopath on the street.
But you've turned into something different, just for the satisfaction of being able to say, or at least contemplate on the fact that you've inverted homogeneity, modernity, whatever that is.
It, like I said, it varies depending on my mood, but there's the satisfaction. You could optimistically look at the benefits. You could be edgy and look at the dire negatives in relation to what society would want. There's the satisfaction of it's like ironically using an entire aesthetic just to you're like using the aesthetic and giving it a middle finger by using it for something they could never even dream of, or something they would never agree to.
Deconstruct. What does all of this have in common?
What everything period that was already said.
Yeah, I think it's just it has in common is that it's just a celebration of the inversion and destruction of homogeneity.
It is, in a way, also subversive of homogeneity, the way that they get swept up in. Oh god, my dad's blasting his fucking knicker music. And it's also subversive the way that pedophiles use them as pedo toys. It's this is still. It's a new method, a new direction of subversion that benefits no materialist group.
Yeah. The celebration of chaos.
It either involves deaths or it involves people achieving so-called enlightenment. Oh god damn it.
Celebration of conflict. It's wonderful. I can hear that. You should have him listen to that kitchen song. But it's great. It's turning the peaceful, homogeneous stability, certainty of what these kids are and growing up to be, and turning them into chaos-driven conflict animals.
It turns them into something that's closer to an actual individual capable of thinking.
The idea being that the actual individual
and they'll just be capable of being
driven to conflict.
They will be capable of being destructive agents. If they have to. If they want to.
Celebration of conflict. It's the beauty of it.
It is, actually. I mean, if it caused chaos, that would be fine. It also just injects pure chaos into the homogeny.
You just want to turn them into chaos warriors. Revel in the fact that you've unleashed monsters on the world.
And speaking of chaos warriors, it's an interesting thing because the setting takes place in something reminiscent of the warp, but it's more like a pure reflection of human psychology in feng shui. it would be it's like almost like an idealization of how
Sorry,
everything
the
would.
setting of what?
This batshit insane thing that I've been writing and making.
What have we been talking about all this time?
You remember me talking about making a game?
This is part of the game.
This is all the game. This is the only, because I have so many crazy ideas involved to it. This is exactly why I feel compelled to actually do it.
Your crudely designed psychedelic video game is what you're gonna use to turn kids into chaos warriors.
Oh, does that sound silly? Because I would like to point.
Oh yeah, you're fucking delusional. But that's amazing that I've been talking all of this time about someone who's intending to implement this in a fucking video game.
I would like to point out to other games and how they have effect. Let me just point to Undertale alone and what that has done to people.
You and your furry fetish is something that
No,
concerns only you.
Not even me. I'm talking children. Children who for some reason played this. Many of them. And what it has done to them.
So you're just going to build your own fucking window into the warp.
That is exactly it. That is exactly the basis of what it is.
It's
So
an
far,
interactive MK Ultra.
it's exactly that. It is. So far, my basis for the setting is that a Terry Davis-esque figure took drugs and became obsessed with designing a method to record ventures into basically the warp, and stuff happens, and eventually it ends up with you, the player, being immersed in it, and you are essentially within the warp.
It's the laziest Project Monarch ever made.
It doesn't have to be perfect or make a lot of sense. It just has to be autistic if you try to think about what's happening around you. And it just has to lay the groundwork. You're not really supposed to think about what's happening. It just has to simulate feelings and introduce thoughts.
You're not in my R9K cesspit, are you? Some interesting images were posted while you were saying that.
No.
I have absolute faith in the fact that you'll be able to make this, because you have to be completely fucking insane to think that you
Dude.
can actually do this.
No. I get fucking plagued by fucking visions ever since I started doing drugs a long time ago. And I feel like I need to develop technical skills before the schizophrenia reaches full force.
Fucking reality deviant.
This is precisely the time of day where my dad sits in the bathroom doing nothing for half an hour, blasting this music.
That's it really is absurd. I'm thinking about what I can contribute to this.
Dude, there's a lot of insanity that I'm genuinely wanting to channel into this to make it feel
yes.
real.
Oh, it's fantastic, and you will succeed. I have no doubt in it. It's just, about how much time and how insane you get before you'll be able to complete it.
The fucking... Okay, modeling is such a pain in the ass alone. And then I can't get programmers to help because they have no idea what I'm trying to tell them. They have no idea what I'm trying to
It took you a
make.
good 2 hours of rambling before I understood this was all about a video game. Yes, I want to take children and I want to make them kill their families and I want to make them turn into honest. You see the deconstruction of, oh no, yeah, it's about a video game. It's all about.
That's still all valid because that is the line of thought that this is based on.
You're the unironic asshole who's actually gonna make the video game that tries to get kids to kill their family. After all of these years of these claims being false, you're the guy who's gonna step over the line.
No, because Harvester was already made, but that guy made it as a joke in response to people saying that games turn kids into serial killers. He's like, well, you know what? I'll literally make that. But see, and he also channeled Feng Shui in a way because he utilized 1950s aesthetics and FMV aesthetics to get his idea in. And then he made a surreal experience when you get to the lodge. So, and my version of that is, it's less of a joke, and I'm instead using retro 3D and drugs and MK Ultra.
The design will not be lacking. I don't doubt that.
It's well, you saw
It's just so far out of your ability to create a game like this.
it is actually, I have the mechanics slide down. See, all of the stuff. No, it's an actual game, but the underlying message is this. It is just a game. It actually started off where I was genuinely just trying to visualize how I could make something from the games I loved in my childhood. And then, naturally, the edgelord took over, and then I just started implanting messages into it. It's
What I'm saying is that you aren't an adept of the virtual arts that are required in creating this.
But see, yes, the programming, I'm still learning it. I'm still in the fundamentals. Modeling actually is not that difficult. It's just time consuming and Blender pisses me off. Did you see the Crowman that I made?
No, I'd love to see that. That your first model after all this would be a crow is interesting.
No, the first model was of the protagonist, but the I also have
I'd
not
like to see both of those then.
I have not textured the protagonist because I switched to the other model before I learned how to do that.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
I'm also still working on this crow, so there's still bugs to
Let me look into the work.
There's textures. The textures, they have little splotches on them. The hair, I haven't figured out transparency yet, so I could make like sprite anime hair. All right. Okay, it's if there's build up to this, let me just.
Why be the least bit humble about this? Just post it all.
But
Especially if it doesn't look like anything.
all right, it's
Is the pro tag the rabbit?
no the rabbit. I am holding on to the rabbit though. The lizards, the spiders.
See,
that's
if
all.
you manage to somehow make this into something,
If it can be made, it will make money.
Yes.
It will make waves. That is why, like, no one else will ever fucking make this because you have to actually be somewhat insane
yes,
and
yes.
obsessed with this shit to actually to even think of this, let alone work on it for like 2 years or whatever.
It's been 2 years.
No, but that's my estimate for it to be complete. Me doing everything by myself.
You'll be finished when you're 40.
Well, it's better than doing nothing. Second,
Yes, it is.
after
The despair has to be a part of the mix.
it will be plenty. I actually started overhaul getting into I did advance through 60 lectures on C sharp while on vacation. Like, I didn't go anywhere for my vacation. I actually just stayed inside and just kept learning C sharp and modeling every fucking day because
Impressive.
because I didn't have work to give me anxiety to fuck me over. So it was just me just doing what I wanted to do, which was apparently this. And that's where the fuck is any model? All right, this okay. This is still the model as I had it, like over a week ago. I'm still like polishing it, trimming it, and then I'm trying to make sure I keep going back to C sharp. But this is the prototype of the one character.
Oh my god. This is nightmare fuel.
This character is like supposed to be like your friend. One of your friends?
This reminds me of Pan's Labyrinth almost already. You ever
No.
seen this? You ever seen that movie?
Let me look it up.
It's a little girl that goes with an absolute monster as her guide and friend.
Is it this pale man?
Yeah,
Is it the guy with the eyes on his hands?
yeah.
It might be like that, but I haven't seen it.
Friends with a little girl, and they go together in this labyrinth that they're trying to get out of.
Oh, well, the protagonist is also a child.
Oh no, no.
But he's not helping you get out of it.
This is a surprisingly good model for someone who's just learning 2 weeks how to do
Yeah.
this.
Dude, I went fucking mental over my vacation.
Those eyes are so.
Dude,
it's
I've
just-
had
you look
vision.
into them and
I've had visions of this fucking character for so goddamn long, and when I finally made the model, I'm like, holy shit! I can't believe I actually achieved something. I've like had character sketches of this thing and had his character planned out, and then when you have it in front of you, it like blows you away.
it's a crow.
It's based on my crow puppet. But
What's a crow puppet?
you remember the puppet show thing podcast I had
What?
with the
You had a puppet show?
no, it's have you ever listened to any of those podcasts where there was actual visuals? It was like on a beach with animals.
No.
Okay,
And those videos are gone now.
I still have the videos of a couple, but one got corrupted. Let me see.
The Crazy Man videos, I didn't watch so much.
It was just the earliest podcasts.
Oh, that's what I didn't see.
The way early podcasts where I just had my real life friends come in.
I can't believe I never looked into that.
It's my
What an interesting development. It starts off, it's this guy with his friends, he does a podcast, video game, and then it just turns to him in a park screaming about pet Krasinski. Now I know why the feds showed up.
Now I just have to. Obviously, something wants me to make this because humanity is now stagnating and it needs a shot of something new. Where is any of my... You said you listened to the... You probably only watched the short
Been a
talk
long.
where the guy talked about his Ukrainian wife. Like,
I remember that. I remember because it was very funny.
did you watch the full one or the short one where it was just an orange on... Or what? Was it the short one or
I
the
can't
long one?
remember. I genuinely
Was
cannot
it 5
remember.
minutes or was it 2 hours?
No, it was like 2 hours.
Okay, the visuals of that is basically where I started on this. Because the visuals for that was directly inspired somehow by something I felt while I was on LSD. And now, over the course of about 2 or 3 years later, it manifested itself into that model. And I'm just rolling with it now.
Tell me about those visions. I really don't have a lot of time actually to sleep, but do tell me about those visions.
It's nothing special. I just get a fucking... You just get an idea of something that seems really good. And I just get a vision of like of something, of what something looks like. And like sometimes I have like pulled my car over and fucking pulled my sketch pad out and just drew it down. So, as many of these random insane visions I get, I try to record them and absolutely include them because I feel like they culminate towards something. Like
Oh
where
yeah.
where what the sense of feng shui comes from. It's like culminating towards that. And it's like it does not matter how I think it looks because obviously it's coming from something and it will be something bizarre. Like I got a vision of like this robot with like this green triangular face with yellow bulbs all over it. And he wears a brown overcoat and underneath is like he has like a bunch of arms with weapons on the end of them. And his face is just... What the vision was showing me was that it was something inherently terrifying to a child that is different from the usual terrifying things I would think of making.
Uh, I cherish moments like that. I had one today, but instead of drawing interesting characters, let me just take a look. In fact, I could take a picture of this just to illustrate the sheer insanity of it. Or I could just try to read it if I can.
It's not just picture.
It's written in code. You can't read it. So, no, I'll just take a picture just for you to know. And what I'd like you to know about this is
Yeah,
focus on those moments and they'll get stronger.
yeah,
much
pretty
better.
much. It's not just pictures and ideas for characters. It's also you can get song ideas, programming ideas. I've actually had at least 2 programming ideas for how to do something, but obvious. I don't know how to reach the in between now and when I'd be able to implement that. Yeah, you can get visions of just about anything. It's pretty useful to just record them.
Not just the vision, it's the creativity, the appeal to a finer sense of the pattern behind things.
It's like you get a real answer, you get an honest, creative idea. And it's almost unexplainable because you just get them at random and total, and I get them just sitting in my car doing absolutely nothing but driving. Yeah, see, I can't understand any of this, but I bet it
If you have
actually.
this recorded, I would be very interested in having it.
Let's see. I'm using OBS this time. I don't know if my hard drive will eat the recording like the other time.
Do try not to.
I would love this
I
recording.
know someone who would put a lot of value on hearing exactly these words.
Is it a 3-letter agency?
Oh, it's so much worse than that 3-letter agency.
Your R9K group?
Oh no, the people behind the R9K group. The R9K cult is just a reception lobby so that we can do exactly what you intend to do to the kids, but in a far more visceral manner.
I would consider asking them for help, but I don't think they know what I'm trying to do. It's
Send me over the recording.
if
They'll understand something that I'm understanding about you, and then you might just have some help.
it's
I'm not going to pretend like we have any kind of resources. I'm not
It's-
technical like.
but see, here's another factor in it is that seeing as I violently switch moods and personalities, it reflects itself in this. So it's like 50% training kids to be domestic terrorists. I mean, birdhouse builders. And the other 50%, I'm legitimately just trying to recreate a childhood game.
And being that you're a birdhouse builder yourself, it really all comes together. It's wonderful, and you should be proud of it.
I feel like the only missing pieces is finishing my understanding of modeling, and then programming is just the big, like, because I have the creativity, I am able to at least draw concept art before I model something to know what it looks like. All I need to know is what it looks like first. I don't need it to match up perfectly. I just need to know what it looks like in general, because that helps a shitload. And then the motivations, the worldviews that I can't say out of my mouth or else I get rated. So it is because It's actually really nice. Every single time I get depressed or feel existential, I literally just throw myself into this, and it makes everything go away. I do get lazy a lot still. Like I was supposed to be fixing that model today, and I was gonna do that while talking, but I'm obviously not doing that. I was doing that for the first half an hour. And I have to, it's extremely tedious because I have to fix this texture map and the UV map. I have to rearrange shit entirely. How the fuck was I on that? This. And I am extremely self-conscious about even sharing anything about the game because it's actually such a good idea just in the mechanics and the setting. It's, if someone was competent and they heard this, they would say, I'm fucking stealing that because that will make at least $100,000.
If that person was a technocrat, they would.
It's not difficult to learn modeling. Like, someone can know how to draw just from doodling in school. So if they just learned programming along the way, they're good to go. Granted, they don't have my book of character notes and the mechanics, but
They don't have the inspiration it takes.
well, something else that would piss me off is if it's something that appears similar, but it's just totally watered down, and then I would come out with it later, and then they would call me the ripoff.
Current state, and they wouldn't have the belief to realize it.
It's all in the immediate presentation. If someone else presented it watered down, it would lose the effect.
All right then. Well, it's 52 past midnight, and I wake up 10 minutes before 5.
It's 90 degrees in my room, and I haven't had the AC on in 3 hours.
So I'll have to call it an interesting conversation.
Just have to hope that it's actually saved, but it is recording, and I am watching the audio fluctuate, which means that it is. Wait. I mean, it has to be fucking working because the audio waves are moving. I've had bullshit happen before. We'll see. I might even just take this to work with me tonight. If it actually saves.
That would be welcome. It would spare me having to write a report. Boy, do I hate writing reports.
Write a report to.
Then my claims would be substantiated. No, not to the FBI, not to the government. To so much worse than that. And I don't care about them or you, so I'll just outright say it. More people are stuck in the or are possessed by the idea that through sheer belief alone, they can inflict on the world their own personal kind of hell.
Yeah.
Some of them have been driven insane by how successful unexpectedly they've been. Some of them are very good at this. I'm sure they could put you in contact with some program. No, of course not.
Alright.
Who am I? Who are they? Never mind.
See, the thing about working with a programmer is how do I stop him from fucking me over at the last minute, running off with everything?
You kill him.
Yeah, what if he
You
lives
kill
in...
him or you get us to kill him. Me. You get me to kill. Actually, I don't have the resources at the time. Yes, all of this is a lot of unsubstantiated claims. We'll leave that for later. I can speak grand and then deliver nothing. Well, that wouldn't be polite. Be polite at all.
Yeah, still in the beginning stages, so it's all just getting ahead of ourselves for now. Because I could just, well, I can't say that I could just collapse into depression and never do it, because anytime I get existential, I start to do this, because it gives me that sense of purpose.
Yeah, and it means that you get to have these great insightful moments. Where you can actualize all that creativity you have.
Driven by, oh, say the crow is kind of like an object of it's almost my mouth, basically, subtly walking people through the lessons, whether they know it or not. And it will be one of the few characters who can't be killed, and there's a reason for that. An actual reason for that. There's meta reasons, and then there's in world reasons. They happen simultaneously, and it's not lame shit like, oh, it's just a game. He also has an end goal, and it actually just ties everything together. So
I'm nodding off. I really should go to sleep.
I'm gonna listen to music for a
Conversation
second.
ends here.
Do it.
Do please upload it sometime soon.
I might just drop the audio file in here for now.
Can you do that right now?
I need to turn it into an MP3. That's operating under the assumption that this recording was successful, but I'm seeing that it says recording and that the audio waves are responding to our voices. So it's really fun having two hard drives that eat all of your files. Let's see, I know. Let's 604. Now that we're recording, it's funny because I've been having power surges that knock my computer off at random any time of the day, and I recently configured OBS to a different file type where it doesn't break videos up into segments as it goes. So that could have happened at any point.
Wunderbar. I need to sleep. Wrap it up.
Well, that's it.
All right.